Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of the Jagannath Bhavan archival talks, which we have been conducting over the last couple of months, featuring recent scholarship that has drawn on the rich visual and textual archives of the CSSC. I am very pleased to welcome today one of our own alumni, one of the CSSC PhD alumni, Dr. Prithwiraj Biswas. Prithwiraj is presently Associate Professor and HOD at Ramakrishna Mission Vidya Mandir at Belur Math. He completed his PhD under Professor Tapati Guha Thakurta here at the CSSC, and his dissertation was titled Advertisements, Manufacturers, and Consumer Culture of Colonial Bengal from 1880 to 1920. He is going to speak to us today on advertising and enterprise, the Bengal chemical story. Over to you, Prithwiraj.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Prasidi. So I wish to thank everyone who has taken time out and joined to hear me today. Before I begin, I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to my supervisor, Professor Tapati Guha Thakurta. I think ma'am is here, so thank you, ma'am, for joining. And without her, frankly, my research would not have been possible. I'm also thankful to her for inviting me to be part of the archival talk series and share my research experience. Now, this talk, as Prachidi just told you, is a part of my thesis and is also part of a monograph that I'm working on currently. So it is important to know a bit about the thesis to place today's talk in correct perspective. My dissertation shows that long before professional advertising began in India, a space for advertising and publicity was already being created within manufacturing firms and the print media to create new consumer market for mass-produced products. Now, what is normally assumed is that the full-fledged growth of a consumer society and the real flourishing of Indian advertising as a profession was a post-independence phenomenon. But my work demonstrates through its detailed study of a set of Bengali manufacturing firms, their advertising strategy and their marketing and publicity initiatives, that there is enough room to draw back that history to the early 20th century. The main intention has been to trace over this period the possible rise of a consumer society and the emergence of advertising, if not as a fully Indianized profession, but at least as a major area of investment of many contemporary Bengali capitalists and entrepreneurs. In so doing, my research situates itself between two trends. One, a history of advertising, and two, a history through advertising. That is a history that has used advertisements as its prime source to reconstruct the commercial career and success of three entrepreneurial firms and their envisioning of new markets for their products. These three are the Ayurvedic firm of C.K. Sen, the firm of Hemendra Mohan Bose, and of course the Bengal chemical and pharmaceutical work, of which the focus of my talk today. Now, I have divided my talk into two parts. In the first part, I will show how I use advertisements to complement and add to the already known history of Bengal Chemical from its inception in 1901. That is the year which saw the firm convert itself into a public limited company. The second part continues the story, but the focus moves away from the main products, chemicals or pharmaceuticals, to the relatively neglected manufacturing of personal products, namely cosmetic and toiletries, through a discussion of the advertising practices of the firm. Now, the reason for choosing 1901 as the limit, which I discussed in the first part, has been guided by twin motives. Firstly, there is no comprehensive history of the firm yet, which details this period from 1893 to 1901. This constraint is due to a lack of appropriate sources, notwithstanding the autobiography of P.C. Roy, which is of course a much used and one of the main sources. But I found that the history of the firm can be moved in new directions when the autobiography is synchronized with information and evidence drawn from a detailed study of Bengal chemical advertisements. Secondly, apart from the objective of filling in this void, I intend to show how advertising provides a unique and valuable means of illuminating the early history of such an important business enterprise. This methodology, I propose, can help reconstruct history in cases where other sources are either meager or unavailable. Now, I'll talk a bit about the research methodology. In the first section, this develops out of a focus largely on a single and crucial source of advertisements in the newspaper, Amrita Vaja Potrika. And it is not based on a sample survey, but a scrutiny of each and every advertisement that was released in the newspaper by Bengal Chemical between the period 1893 to 1920. The choice of Amrita Bajar also needs a bit of elaboration. Amrita Bajar was one of the very few contemporary English language indigenous newspaper which has a large circulation and therefore a natural choice of advertiser. Moreover, I found that this was a media which Bengal Chemical preferred to promote its product almost on a regular basis. Thus, it afforded a scope to follow the company by following the advertisements in a way that answered my questions about the firm in its early years, which otherwise are absent in traditional sources on Bengal Chemical. Like the marketing strategy, for example, or the publicities of the firm, the product range, the production history, the market in which the firm was operating, etc. Now, I'm also aware that while following a single source, there are limitations to an overemphasis. One is that this study does not have, the advantage of parallel studies required for comparison. And the justification of using a large corpus of advertising rather than a sample survey is to take you through each advertisement, but I'm not doing that. I'll just take you through those which I've used in this presentation to, stitch the story and looked into the shifts that are perceived. The idea is to show that subtle changes in the content of the advertisement, the time of the release, the text and illustration, size, positioning, offer clues and information to chronicle the advertiser and his firm better. In the absence of any reliable chronological account of the company in its early days, advertisements helped me follow the history of the company week by week by following the advertisements that were released each week in Amrita Bajar. So this procedure offered a new way of researching advertisements as primary sources of study, where the advertisements themselves became object of analysis and advertising emerges as an important commercial and business enterprise in its own right, even as it serves a new platform for studying the world of business and product manufacturers. And any scholar who's looking at advertising as sources, particularly in India, there's a problem to access source. Firstly, there is very few product specific advertisement catalog. And secondly, there are only a handful of archives dedicated to advertisements, and CSSS is definitely one of them. Now, while I use the unused archive of advertisements of Bengal Chemical released in the Amrita Bajar, I also took care to complement and corroborate the information received from them from other sources, such as advertisements and reporting, other newspapers like the Bengali or the Indian Mirror, and contemporary journals like Prabhashi, Bharati, Bande Mataram, and others. And of course, the autobiography of P.C. Roy, the history of the Bengal Chemical, which was put together much later. Also, my exploration into the factory site allowed me to access additional documents and texts, which, while more relevant for a technical history of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, also gave me vital information on the practices of the farm. Finally, an opportunity to interview a family member, Arun Rai Chaudhary, is a son of the elder brother of P.C. Roy, proved very fruitful as I received valuable information. It's unknown, but very, very important as far as this study was concerned. Now, in the second part, the methodology followed is different because I realized that the advertisements of personal products manufactured by Bengal Chemical, particularly that included images, were not released in newspapers usually, but in vernacular journals, probably because of the cost factor, then the lifespan or what is known as the shelf life of newspapers and lack of quality reproduction. There's a difference between the paper quality used in newspapers and journals. So the picture quality appears better with images in journals. So as a consequence, I had to research both newspapers and journals of contemporary Bengal to complete my study. Now, when did the advertisements of Bengal Chemical commence? Now, this is relevant because advertisements require two preconditions on part of the advertiser. First, funds to advertise, and second, an adequate stock to justify publicity. But Prithwiraj Roy had none of these two when he started his enterprise. As initial investment, all he could manage to plow was a modest sum of 700 to 800 rupees. So neither could he manufacture enough, nor did he have funds to justify advertising a small stock. But he had a plan. He had researched well, and he proceeded, accordingly. He concentrated on articles which were in demand, whose production needed raw materials which were available locally, which he could manufacture using his own knowledge base and expertise, and for which he did not need any major investment. And this is how the idea of manufacturing chemicals and pharmaceuticals came to him. The demand, his expertise and locally available materials. Now, to begin with, Prithwiraj concentrated on manufacturing basic chemicals which used to be imported. In his autobiography, he explains that chemicals were indispensable to industries and modern medical professions. So what he did, he prioritized the manufacture of chemicals first and then utilized the same to produce medicine. The aim was to reduce imports and dependence in the field of medicine and chemicals, which was in tune with his philosophy of Swadeshi. At this stage, most of the preliminary experiments on preparation and testing of a product for its conformity with the standards set by the British Pharmacopoeia were done by P.C. Roy in the Presidency College Laboratory in his spare time. Once the method was standardized, large-scale preparations for the preliminary market trials were made in the outhouse. It was actually meant to serve as a kitchen at his residence at 91 Upper Circular Road. So the genesis of Bengal Chemical began in the most unlikely of spaces, in a college laboratory and the outbuilding of a home. And in this venture, P.C. Roy was joined by a fellow student who by then was a successful medical practitioner, Amulya Charan Bose. The initial challenge before the duo was to produce medicine according to the standard of British Pharmacopoeia. Not only that, such was the bias of foreign medicines and products that P.C. Roy had to bottle, label, and pack his preparations on the European model. To get an idea of how the foreign manufacturers were packing their product, P.C. Roy once donned a lungi and mingled with laborers working with a foreign form. With his unkempt look and beard, he resembled a laborer and was not suspected. And I'm thankful to Arun Raichaudhuri for giving me this snippet. And once inside the factory, he would see firsthand the packing process and then imitate it with products manufactured by him. The beginnings of the company were thus laid down by the parameters of a market which had a definite bias for foreign medicines. Writing on the reaction of local drug dealers, he notices that firms of Bilati, firms, they were in demand, whereas Desi drugs, that is indigenous drugs, were not at all welcome. So to use his own words, Bengal Chemical had an uphill task from the very beginning. However, to counter this bias and problem, his partner Amulya Charan Bose came up with a practical solution. He got his doctor friends to introduce the preparation of Bengal Chemical to patients by prescribing it to them. And this is something which is even done to only the medical representatives do it now. And very interestingly, material which I found in the Bengal Chemical Library, it's a technical book on the advertisements of chemicals and allied products. It states that the physicians of the times held a power which could be compared favorably with the priest of the Middle Ages. Therefore, a doctor's goodwill towards any firm was worth a lot. And it goes on to state that the practitioner was thus to be assiduously cultivated. Now, they started some of the best practitioners and some of the rising stars, Neel Ratan Sarkar, Suresh Prasad, Sharbadhikari, Radha Govindakar, R.G. Kaur. They prescribed the medicines of Bengal Chemical. However, while the help of the doctor friends helped P.C. Roy to find a footing in the pharmaceutical business, it was also important to publicize the company, because a few other than his doctor friends prescribing the firm's medicine knew anything at all about the manufacture. Of course, in 1892-93, few really knew P.C. Roy. The transformation of P.C. Roy to Acharya Prafulla Chandra or Sir Prafulla Chandra would occur much later. But this was the early phase when P.C. Roy did not have the advantage of his reputation to sell his products. Therefore, the only way to ensure sales was through regular advertising. But before that, he felt that his firm should have a name. Since he was manufacturing both chemicals and pharmaceuticals, he chose a name that represented both. Thus began the journey of Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceutical Works. Now, existing scholarship rightly mentioned 1893 as the year in which the company was formally launched, but none discuss how it was made known to the public and when exactly. Since scholars have not felt the worth of looking at advertisements, they miss the fact that it was on the very first day of 1893, on 1st January, that the firm was launched and made known to the public. Prachidi, a slide. So while that advertisement is significant as the first publicity material released by the historic firm, the advertisement was typical, but I'm not going into the details because I'm going to talk about the takeaways from that. So it was clustered in a single column. Yeah, this the one which you see on your screen is how it looked when it appeared in the newspaper. Prachit, if you could go to the next slide. So that, this is enlarged. So as you can see, it has the name of the company in capital letters. Then it introduces PC Roy and Amulya Charan Bose, along with the expertise and qualification, their professional standing, and goes on to say that over 100 preparations of British pharmacopoeia was ready to be sold. But if you come down to the bottom of the art, that is what I would ask you to focus on. I don't know whether it can be seen. It informs that the firm's analytical department undertook chemical analysis of ores, urine, minerals, manure, milk, and ghee. Now, this is very interesting because this is not mentioned in the autobiography of PC Roy, because adulteration of food was rampant in contemporary Bengal, as evident from news reports. I've seen a few of them. So it is likely that PC Roy saw a business opportunity in analyzing food products. In fact, legal suits were quite common against unscrupulous dealers of adulterated foodstuffs. So this might have created a spurt in knowing what was genuine and what was adulterated. In fact, this was not limited to Bengal. In a discussion of tea in Victorian Empire, Erika Rappaport talks about the risk and anxiety among consumers about adulteration in Chinese tea in England. And she writes on the role of chemical analysis. She says that chemists were especially prominent in exposing the problem of food safety, and in doing so, helped their individual careers and aided in the establishment of chemistry as a profession. So we see this more or less the same case, but how far it aided PC Roy's career is debatable. But by exposing the problem of food safety, his reputation and that of his new firm definitely stood to gain if readers of his advertisements would be informed how goods were contaminated, since these were crucial to the taste, the value, the health of specific commodities. Again, since the role of PC Roy is well known for the establishment of chemical science in India, these efforts of PC Roy, as we see in the advertisement, is in reality part of the discourse as well. And finally, these efforts may have played a role in advancing his career as a chemist, since his was the first private initiative to offer the services of exposing spurious products in Bengal. Interestingly, after this ad, I saw ads of other chemical companies like the Victoria Chemical Company, the Peacock Chemical Company, and stating that they too also have an analytical department which is looking at the analyzing foodstuff and adulterated goods, etc. So it might have helped PC Roy and his company gain an age. In fact, in the following year, in 1894, Acharya Roy actually publishes his findings on adulteration in the Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal. And in the same ad, the last two lines, you'll see there's a manager, proprietary manager, Satish Chandra Sinha. Now, this is also very interesting, which I found out, the naming of a manager. This needs explanation. Now, Tirthankar writes, Roy writes that in the days of scarce managerial talent, a manager was looked upon as a rare resource. Larger companies used a specialized firm called managing agencies, but for a fee, of course, where the same job was delegated to an individual manager in smaller firms. In fact, the presence of the manager implied more than just that the firm was professionally managed. It reflected financial stability, where the firm had the resources to employ a manager. And these measures were probably introduced by contemporary business establishment, because many small and local companies began to, say that they too have a manager. And these were there in advertisements. These measures were introduced by contemporary business establishments to give confidence to consumers as far as the firm and its products were concerned. One can say that these were in essence exercises in public relations. As explained by David Arnold, these were some of the methods that indigenous firms were emulating from their Western counterparts to appear credible in the mind of clients of their products and readers of advertisements. And these early advertisements also saw the formal initiation of PC Roy in advertising copywriting. But Alexander St. Clair Geddes, he's a writer of advertisements of chemicals and allied product. He says that creating medicine advertisement was not an easy task actually. And what made the task particularly complex was that a specialized branch of chemical study had to be presented in a language that made sense to the indigenous readers who had no idea of the intricacy of modern medicine. In fact, this was an age when advertising agencies or professionals had not yet made their appearance. And since most of the advertisements were written by advertisers themselves, they had to look at mostly foreign advertisements as models of emulation. The initial advertisements of Bengal chemicals were no exceptions. If you see, compact, a lot of information crammed together to save cost perhaps. But to offset this limitation in advertising creativity, PC Roy soon improved in this area as well. To begin with, the slapdash look in the advertisement, which you just saw, Prachi, the next slide, was taken care of. The advertisement, as you can see in this, it highlighted product name in each case with a brief introduction, making a refreshing change from the one which you saw, which was typed closely, and it actually made reading difficult. Another change, as you can see, is the choice of naming fewer products to make the advertisement look a bit neater and spaced out. And another very significant aspect is the absence of any allusion to British pharmacopea in the advertisement, with the focus now on the self-sufficiency of Bengal Chemical. It says special, preparations with a new confidence about the quality of these preparations. However, the company was still manufacturing its products on the lines of British pharmacopoeia, but now it did not need to state it specifically to sell them. It wanted to market its product on the basis of its own merit as an indigenous firm. I argue that this can be seen as the small beginnings of the phase that marked the gradual transition of the company towards becoming a truly indigenous enterprise. And this was the second year. The company was also expanding its client base and was manufacturing specific products that could be sold to residents of Mofosshol. Very interesting. If you look, towards the last two products in the ad, it'll give you an idea. The manner in which aquaticotis, a digestive, stomachic, as well as a carminative product, was actually sold is, it tells a lot about PC Roy and his business acumen. It had two variants, if you can see, one the regular and the other concentrated. It is clearly mentioned there. Now, PC Roy ensured that the Mofosshol PC Roy knew that the Mofosshol customers had only limited access to drugstore. So I ensured that whatever product the customers would be ordering would be in such concentrated proportions that it would ensure a longer shelf life without losing its effectiveness. An advantage of this arrangement was that it ensured that customers enjoyed full value of the product over a long time. It has to be remembered that PC Roy was operating in a milieu when advertising was still in its nascent stage and specialized marketing had not yet evolved. So under the circumstances, he not only worked on product innovation, so he had to take steps to ensure that his message reached the intended target audience. The same year, the company released a double column advertisement for the first time. Next slide, Prachidi. The advertisement was clutter-free and focused on a single product, which was the syrup hypophosphite of line, a tonic element related to lungs, etc. The overall execution of the advertisement was neater, text is easy to read, and instead of the 100 products that the firm claimed it had been manufacturing, the advertisements now prints of 200 preparation, implying that the company had in fact doubled its production capacity. Now, keeping in mind the high cost of newspaper advertising and the substantial increase in size of Bengal Chemical advertisements, it can be suggested that the company had encouraging sales to plow some profits to both double its productive capacity and to expand its publicity campaigns. In his autobiography, Prithwiraj actually speaks of this phase as one of satisfaction. He writes, things were getting on merrily and prosperously. But then there was a major tragedy. The accidental death of Satish Chandra Sinha, his manager, while working with hydrocyanic acid. Now, this is very, very interesting. The event of the tragic death of Satish Chandra Sinha is reflected in the advertisement which you actually, which is there on the screen. And this is of 29 July 1894, which for the first time does not mention his name. If you see the earlier ads, it has the name of this young talent, a trained chemist, and a valuable acquisition as far as P.C. Roy is concerned. And he was actually poisoned while working in the company laboratory. Now, P.C. Roy does not mention the date of the incident in any of his writing. And this advertisement proves beyond doubt that the death of Satish Chandra actually took place sometime between 15th to 22nd July. Why I say this? Because the issue, the week dated 15th and 22nd, this is not available. I got the 29th. So I assume that the death took place sometime here. So the advertisement of the firm without the name of the manager continued to be released till the end of the year with another notable change, again in the number of preparation that the company was manufacturing, which was now 300. Now, of course, there's the lack of corroborative evidence because that was the private stage of the company. It prevents us from firmly laying out the economic arc of the company. But assuming what the company claimed in its advertisement was at least partially true, it can be inferred with a degree of surety that the enterprise was going from strength to strength. However, the specter of death would continuously throw its long shadow on the progress of the firm. Following the death of Satish Chandra Sinha, another death which affected the fortunes of the company was that of Harish Chandra Rai, Prithwiraj's father. He died at a time when the family property was mortgaged, and the personal loss and the settlement of mortgage required P.C. Roy to focus his attention to family rather than company affairs for some time, and definitely affected the fortunes of the firm. Concurrently, on the business side, a sulfuric acid plant brought over a year back was proving unproductive and had to be sold. That all these events had a bearing on the finances of P.C. Roy and the functioning of the company is reflected in the next set of advertisements released by the company. Next, Prachidi, which were considerably reduced in size and relegated to just one column. So it is quite apparent, Prachidi, next slide, that the company had drastically slashed its advertising budget. Prachidi, can you hear me? Yeah. So this is the full page, and it gives you an idea how small it has become. However, in a hope to pick up sales, the company started highlighting three of its most popular products: syrup of hypophosphate of lime, and this is mentioned in his autobiography also, aqua tycotis. And these were released one at a time in consecutive issues. But what is significant here is the manner in which the company was marketing these products. Next slide, Rachidi. So in the first week, syrup of hypophosphate of lime will be advertised. In the next week, the other one, the next week, aqua tycotis, and this will follow. And this pattern continued till the first week of November 1895, and it reflected the calculated and nifty marketing strategy of the firm. For in this strategy, all the three products got equal visibility. And if you see the ads, if you look at that carefully at the bottom, you'll see that the company had by this time got another manager in the form of A.C. Bose, and one gets an idea of the men linked to the firm, which are otherwise not mentioned in the autobiography, nor mentioned anywhere. Now, in mid-November 1895, the company released its largest advertisement till date in Amrita Bazaar Putrika. Next slide, please. Featuring 9 products, all prepared from indigenous drugs. Now, though the company had begun by manufacturing drugs according to the standard of British pharmacopoeia, it did not lose sight of its important founding object of developing indigenous drug resources. Accordingly, Dr. Amulya Charan Bose gave a new direction to the company's business by collecting from the leading Kobiraji Prithwiraj of Calcutta the formula and recipes of several Ayurvedic preparation and scientifically adapted them to prepare new products for Bengal Chemical. In his autobiography, P.C. Roy again does not mention the name of the Prithwiraj, who provided him with the Ayurvedic formula, and existing scholarship too are silent. But I argue that it is actually Prithwiraj Upendranath Sen and Devendranath Sen, whose firm C.K. Sen and Company I've studied in detail, and who are very close to Prafulla Roy. In fact, Prithwiraj Upendranath Sen later held the post of the director of Bengal Chemical twice, an honor which records show was not bestowed on anyone else in the first 50 years of the firm. And Prithwiraj Upendranath Sen was, in fact, also one of the regular members of the Betaler Boithak, an informal meet of close friend of P.C. Roy at the Calcutta Maidan every evening. And this comes from none other than Meghnad Shah, a student. And he writes that these indigenous medicine not only gained a popularity among the medicine profession, doctors were prescribing them, and a student writes there's evidence of them. And from our students, we get to know that there is evidence that they were used in hospitals also. And this is the stage when the company is now beginning to be known on account of the merits of its products. And Prafulla Chandra writes that dealers who had turned their backs on the firm are now beginning to make inquiries and stock the company's products. By 1897, Prachiti, next slide, the company name was beginning to dominate its advertisements. Now, its commercial success was compounded by the new prestige of the founder of the firm, as P.C. Roy had become famous as the discoverer of mercurous nitride the earlier year, that is in 1896. And this was reported in the contemporary newspapers and journals. P.C. Roy was recognized for his work. This would be Prachiti, slide 10. So, leading academicians of the world recognized him. And for the first time, the advertisements of the firm began to draw on testimonials of medical practitioners and high-ranking men in charge of medical establishments, certifying the products of the firm. And among the well-known name endorsing the products were, of course, Neel Ratan Sarkar, Radha Raman Ghosh, slide 10, B.B. Kapoor, etc. The next advertisements of the firm, slide, this will be 11, next slide, includes more testimonial, but from a news set. But this advertisement is significant because if you look at the image carefully, you will see that there's a visual of the company, of the company's product that was packed and ready to be sold. And this was the syrup hypophosphate of lime. Now, that the company was also poised to expand its market in a big way is indicated as the last line of the same advertisement. I don't know whether this can be seen. It invites respectable agents to distribute its medical preparations throughout the country. Now, commission agents of Dalal had a negative connotation in the mind of consumers in general, as many of them were involved in fraudulent dealings. P.C. Roy did mention in his autobiography that he had actually engaged a Dalal broker that was known to him. But now, I mean, because his company was reputed, sales were picking up, he needed more agents. And by inviting respectable agents, he hoped that he would get men who could be relied upon to do their job of distributing the company's products responsibly. And one advantage that P.C. Roy enjoyed over imported medicine, and I'm thankful that Arun Rai Chaudhary actually told me this, is he told me that Bengal Chemical products were fresh because the imported medicine took time to arrive. So probably he needed these responsible agents to deliver the medicines without delay. And in fact, I later discovered in another advertisements that Bengal Chemicals actually use this as their sales pitch as well. It stated our preparations being freshly made is superior to similar European articles. And this was the phase of expansion for the company. And it had already expanded its production capacity, which we already mentioned. And now it wanted to reach out to a wide range of consumers. Now, experts on contemporary advertising have observed that for regular advertisers, the cumulative value of advertising is enormous. Hence, after a long spell of continuous and sustained advertising, one could afford to discontinue it for some time. This is what we see in 1898 when the company took a break from advertising. I did not see any advertising in this phase in 1898. In fact, in his autobiography, P.C. Roy mentions how the company was in a position to feel its way in the market. Wholesale dealers were making inquiries about the supply of various products. This was also the year when the company had participated in the Indian Medical Congress and had got very favorable response and accolades for its products. In fact, the efficacy of the products also led some of them being added to the addendum of the British pharmacopoeia. The decision to temporarily suspend advertisement could be seen as a sign of confidence of the firm in the continuing sale of its products following a long spell of sustained publicity. However, as in the past, when the company was doing well, tragedy struck once more. And this was the death of his founder partner, Amulya Charan Bose. In his autobiography, P.C. Roy mentioned how Amulya Charan Bose was indispensable to Bengal Chemical and how his death was a big setback to the company, which found it difficult to carry on its regular activities. In fact, the account of Bengal Chemical, as P.C. Roy described in his autobiography, ends abruptly. If you read it, you will realize. After this event, only to suggest that 3 years later, this turned into a limited company. Countless writings on Bengal Chemical has followed the same path without much investigation. It would seem that the absence of Amulya Charan Bose was one of the reasons behind this decision. But there is more to the untold story, and I will just talk about it. And this comes through, again, advertisement. So the momentary setback, it does not deter P.C. Roy from his goal. He was more determined to carry the vision that he and Amulya Charan Bose had actually shared when they started the company. Narratives sympathetic to P.C. Roy state that this was a stage when he took his work as a sacred mission and was not willing to allow calamities come in the way of his mission. In fact, the advertisements of Bengal Chemical make a comeback in January 1899, announcing itself to the only indigenous manufacturing industry of its kind. Prachi, the next slide. The stress on the word industry used in the advertisements was a deliberate insertion. If you look at the advertisements, you will realize that all the products were made from, indigenous, formula. And it meant to signify that the company had grown to be an industry of its own. And it also spoke of the confidence that P.C. Roy had with respect to his enterprise and indigenous preparation. And the same advertisement also informed us that Bengal Chemical had secured the services of Dr. Nilratan Sarkar, if it can be seen, as the new medical advisor, filling the gap created by the death of Amulya Charan Bose. The induction of Nilratan Sarkar as a medical advisor shows the business expertise of P.C. Roy, for Dr. Sarkar was by then the most reputed doctor of the city. In his writing, P.C. Roy had mentioned how Nilratan Sarkar used to prescribe his medicine when the company was struggling to establish them itself. But nowhere did he mention that Nilratan was actually associated with the company, even if for a brief period, as its medical advisor. That is, someone who communicates on a scientific level with prescribing physician, medical investigation, pharmacists, etc. And this is a fact that is now revealed only through the company's advertisements of 1899. More importantly, for the first time in its advertisements, the company warns the public against unscrupulous trade people who have been indulging in unfair trade practices with the products of the company. And these can be taken as indicators of Bengal Chemical's steady commercial success and a demand for its product in the market. Now, the next advertisement is very interesting. And next slide, please. It introduces a new set of preparation that the company had manufactured and put up for sale. And if you can see the ad, one of them is Coca wine, C-O-C-A, Coca, and the other is the Cola wine, introduced in successive line, one below the other, as you see in the ad. Now, the resemblance in the name of Coca-Cola, the popular drink, is unmistakable. But even if influenced by the catchy name of the soft drink, I'm assuming that the advertisements because it was launched in 1886, much earlier than P.C. Roy's firm. So the advertisements of Coca wine and Cola wine shows, another lineage. The health tonics were actually made from cola nut, an African fruit, and coca leaves, and hence a name as such. But just like Coca-Cola, whose whose name were inspired from the main ingredients, Coca and Cola. And the stakeholders of Coca-Cola ultimately changed its marketing strategy, selling Coca-Cola as a refreshing cool drink from its earlier pitch as a patent drink that later on went on to become phenomenal. It still enjoys the same, reputation and popularity worldwide. The product of PCRA, on the other hand, have not enjoyed such glory. I'm still in the research process of this. What I found out is very, very interesting. First is, Coca-Cola and the Coca-Cola of PCRA, it has more or less the same history. It was sold from, Coca-Cola was sold from a pharmacy named Jacob Pharmacy, just like PCRA's products. And it was created by a pharmacist, John Pemberton. What is more interesting is that the same kind of, therapeutic usage which Coca-Cola used to advertise, that is headache, tired feelings, release physical or mental exertion. This is the same that is also there in PCRA's ad. Another thing, one of the reasons why Coca-Cola, changed into a soft drink from a therapeutic one, was that coca, which was the main ingredient, was used to produce cocaine, and that was banned by legislation. Maybe I'm not sure, but maybe the raw material was short in coming. Also, the prices of the product was very expensive. Just to give you an idea, the coca wine, this was priced at ₹3. Now, why I mentioned ₹3 is that I've seen advertisement in contemporary newspaper stating that luxury watches were also selling for ₹3. So this will give you an idea of, how highly, priced this was. Anyway, so in the next slide, we see that the Bengal Chemical had manufactured another new product, and this was against plague. And next slide, please. This was well-timed because I think this was the third bubonic plague reported in various parts of the country and threatening Bengal. And it shows how the company was adept in diversifying its products to meet demands and cash in on the new markets. And the first advertisement of the company that I was able to trace, this one, was June 28, 1900. The advertisement mentioned that the company had been awarded, next slide please, 4 gold medal for its products, and all the medical products of the company were now available with BK Paul and Company. It was the largest distributing house of medicinal products in Eastern Bengal, as well as other deals. In another advertisement released the same year, but later in 16th October, it warned the public of the manner by which the popularity of the company's specialities had called into existence several ignorant and unscrupulous imitators. It warned the public to take action against being supplied with spurious and worthless substitutes, and advised them to insist on Bengal chemical preparations and examine carefully its label and register trade. It further elaborates the manner in which this imitator had sunk so low that even the catalogue of Bengal Chemical has been copied line per line. Now, in this period of diversification and consolidation, the available space of the original factory at Circular Road proved to be inadequate for the expanding manufacturing needs of the company. The firm also needed more capital and manpower. So with this end in view, and to raise more capital in 1901, the company was converted into a limited company, beginning a new phase with a new name, the Bengal Chemical and Pharmaceutical Works Limited. Thus ended the first chapter in the history of the company, in which foresight, determination, perseverance prevailed. Now, one of the central themes which I talked about is the role played by advertisement in tracking the expansion of the firm and the growing popularity of its product. The idea behind regular publishing and advertising by the firm was not only to draw attention to the products of Bengal Chemical, but also to ensure that people could buy them over the counter or order them by post instead of going to the doctor. One can say, therefore, that through these advertisements, Bengal Chemical remedies for common illness and other minor illness were almost standing in for the doctor and providing self-medication option to people. Advertisements of the period testify to this fact. For example, next slide, please. And advertisements of Victoria Chemicals stated, treat yourself, secretly at home. Again, Next, yes. Dr. Pare's advertisement states, no more fever, no more cholera, no more doctor's bill. If you see the next slide. Now, this is very significant because the medicines advertised were meant to be brought directly from a retailer, bypassing the doctor on the basis of information that the advertisements provided about. One of the selling strategies for these was to show how consumers of these could save both time spent and the high fees of a visit to the doctor's chamber. The firm also offered the client the option of choosing the medicine according to symptoms and benefits from lower prices from the various, medicines up for sale. Of course, there were risks involved because not all companies and their medicine were as effective as the advertisement claimed that they were. So what the firm of Bengal Chemical under the stewardship of P.C. Roy was supporting and creating them was a new domain of social medicine and family-based healthcare. The importance of this endeavor is shown up in the way P.C. Roy himself took to writing advertisements initially from the firm and its product in some of the leading newspapers and papers of the time. In his autobiography, this is volume 2, he gives an example of an advertisement written by him, which was actually published in Sanjeevani. In fact, he clearly understood the importance of advertisements for the growth of his firm, recognizing advertisement, and I quote, as a modern art that was necessary and relevant for the times. This underlines the importance of study of these advertisements and their use as prime source of the history of the company in its initial years. And these advertisements point to the way P.C. Roy was straddling the powerful role of an expert scientist and chemist, manufacturer and business entrepreneur, and moving out of his domain of pure scientific research into the new domain of social medicine and family healthcare. Prachidi, how much time do I have, or have I finished? Okay, so I'll just move to the next. I'll just take 5-7 minutes. So I'll just move to the next.
Fine. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Yeah.
Yeah. This brings us to the interesting phase in the history of the company when Bengal Chemicals had begun to expand its product range to items that were clearly in demand. And this was, personal products. There's a glance of advertisements of contemporary journals and newspaper make it very clear how indigenous manufacturers had made inroads into personal products and toiletries. And it was in this same domain of commercial personal products that Bengal Chemical too was making a big plunge. But Prithwiraj Roy was not very idea that his company should manufacture cosmetic and toiletries. He led a frugal life, austere living. Luxury items like cosmetics was a waste when majority of his countrymen, he stated, did not have the basic needs to buy necessities. In fact, when I spoke to Arun Rai Chaudhary, he says that there was a tension between Rajshekhar Bose, who was Rajshekhar Parashuram Bose, the writer, who was the manager at that time. And it was Rajshekhar Bose who convinced him of the demand. And it seems that P.C. Roy reluctantly had to give in to the demands of the new market. And the available advertisements of Bengal Chemical in Bengali journals of the time make it clear that Mollika, Bela, Bokul were the first perfumes manufactured by the firm. And in due course, a range of perfumery would be introduced. Nageshwar, Champak, Juthi, Ushi, Gandhiraj, Aguru. This last one became very, very popular as contemporary sources tell us. In fact, what is very interesting, even before Bengal Chemical had started to manufacture perfumes, it had in its first phase made some venture into personal products, despite the reservation of P.C. Roy. But then, I don't know whether slide 13 can be shown once again. This is the same slide which had the ad of Coca wine and Cola wine. Just below that, you will see that they had introduced, yes, this one, golden cantharidin hair oil to stimulate the healthy growth of weak and falling hair. Now, I want to say there was a basic difference in the nature of hair oil that was sold in the period, keeping in mind that hair oil can have both cosmetic and therapeutic usage. If you follow the claims made in the copy of Bengal Chemical advertisements of the cantharidin hair oil, and I mean there are the similar story in other advertisements of other firms, it becomes obvious that hair oil was essentially sold by manufacturer as a restorative to prevent hair loss, irrespective of the fact that it was agreeably perfumed or had a cosmetic appeal. I actually found out that the concept of selling hair oil as a beauty product would come much later. But at that time, hair oil was advertised to address one basic problem, hair loss, and presented itself as a curative product with therapeutic properties. And it is only from 1906 onwards that the first set of non-personal, that is beauty products of the Bengal Chemical was launched. That was floral hair oil. And I'll just briefly point out the difference. Instead of the negatives, that is to say, hair fall and all that, loss of hair, it goes on to describe the aesthetics, the positive aspect that was more in tune with a cosmetic. I'll just give an example. For producing cloud-like, wavy, abundant hair oil, floral hair oil is indispensable. Or the fragrance of floral hair oil is of a million fresh blown flowers, subtle yet powerful, delicate yet persistent. So, this was the transformation. A hair oil which hitherto had been marketed as a therapeutic product become a product associated with beauty as well as sweet fragrance. And the change in sales speech seems to have created demand and sales for the product. Because the very next year in 1909, this oil was registered with a trademark. In a large display advertisement, the firm explained that unprecedented popularity of the hair oil had brought into being worthless preparation of the same in the market, and to guard against spurious imitation, every bottle of floral hair oil would bore the pushball, trademark. Now, by then, the company was also manufacturing other personal products. And advertisements in Vande Mataram shows that in addition to hair oil, the firm was manufacturing tooth powder, complexion balm, that is skin lightener, cold creams. And what PC Rai did, maybe this was the idea of Rajshekhar Bose, who was the manager, to keep the price low so that the product once purchased would be procured repeatedly on its own merit. In 1909, the firm introduced Nabo Pushpan, the one that you were showing, Prachiti, and the one which is there in the, the poster. Now, very interestingly, we get to know the unique, yes, this one. It's written in Bengali, you can read it. That it claimed that it did not freeze in winter, nor was it spoiled in summer months. As a child, I remember, coconut oil getting, frozen in winter. So people of my generation would probably relate to this. So these are, some of the interesting aspects and qualities that we get to know. Again, while introducing its talcum powder, it tried to make the consumer aware of the technicalities involved in making a quality products. For example, the ingredients of the exquisite toilet preparation have all been passed through a silken sieve having 640,000 meshes to the square inch, making the powder infinitely finer. So clearly, talcum powder was grainy, and Bengal Chemical was offering a better alternative. So these were the new elements that were introduced by Bengal Chemical in the products and in their modes of advertising to keep products updated in a rapidly changing market. Now, on the eve of First World War, I'll just take 2 minutes, the company was beginning to illustrate its advertisements in a manner not seen earlier. For example, the next slide, the advertisement for Ajwan, a health tonic, features a young man who is physically fit, mentally active, having benefited from the tonic. The illustration is divided into two parts. The one on the left shows this gentleman, Bengali gentleman, evident from his attire, playing football with his friend. It is juxtaposed on the other half by an image of the same man now in his study. In the layout and use of letters or calligraphy, this advertisement is now moving towards a more oriental form of art. The illustration of a Bengali babu clad in a dhoti and shirt, the hookah, it completes the oriental image. And these were, in fact, the first of the series of advertisements of Bengal Chemical where human figures were included. And by 1913, I'm just skipping, we have, ladies, females make their appearance. Initially, it was the pictures of mother and child. And these are important milestones. I have discussed this in detail in my dissertation, in the sense that by depicting native females, these advertisements were now trying to attract their attention as potential consumers. It was hoped that educated women would exercise their rights in the choice of consumer products. This was particularly so in the case of pediatric product because it was expected that only the mother knew what is best for the child. Earlier, the mothers had to depend on the doctors or on midwives, but now the city-based educated mothers especially had an option to bypass the doctors and medical men and choose on the basis of advertisements, medical and other consumer products in a new spirit of confidence. One advertisement of Bengal Chemical, for example, the next slide, please, has an illustration of a lady who claims that she is not afraid. Amar moteo bhoy hoy na, if you see, or I'm not afraid of the disease affecting the child, as she uses Bengal Chemical products for a child. That advertisement shows the lady holding on to a chubby baby. So I'll just conclude, with the words of Douglas Haynes, who has worked on consumer culture and advertisements in India. So he says that in South Asia, essentially, we have overlooked advertisements as sources, and there is actually few writings. So how the firms created a demand for their products is actually unknown. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to address both these lacunae and show the effectiveness of advertisements as sources to reconstruct various history, business history in this case. And I also show the efforts of a scientist in creating a successful indigenous enterprise as an alternative to Western parlance. And in doing so, I also show how a market for products were gradually created, not only among the urban middle class, which are based in the city, but also in areas far removed from them. And among urban classes, women were also now being groomed as a potential consumer by the time we come to the end of our study, which is approximately now 1920. So thank you so much for hearing me and for your patience. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Prithwiraj. That was rich and detailed and really wonderfully narrated also. There's going to be a lot of questions, I'm sure, so we will go straight to the Q&A. As always, if you have a question, please type in the chat and say you have a question. I will call on you to ask your question. So please, the floor is open.
Do I need to open the chat box to read the question, or I mean, how will I?
If somebody actually types the question there, read out, because I think you'll have a problem on your mobile. I'll read out the question, or people can unmute themselves and ask the question. Just so I know whom to call on, I'm asking people to sort of mention in the chat. Do we have somebody who has a question ready to go? Yes. Rajushri Dashgupta, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sorry, this is Sushil Khanna. But I just have a question. Why would you ignore other sources like the annual reports of the company, board of directors minutes, and so on and so forth? See, there are other colleagues who have worked on Bengal Chemicals around that time, and they had a whole set of annual reports, board of directors meetings, and so on. Same kind of questions would have a lot more data information there, including production, product prices, all kinds of things.
So should I answer?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Actually, I started from 1893 till 1901. This was the private, phase of the company. Okay. If the accounts which you are stating, I've seen those accounts from 1901 when the company is, public limited. You have all those accounts. So in this phase, from 1893 to 1901, there is no, sales account, no board of directors, nothing, because this is a private phase of the company, except, for the autobiography of P.C. Roy. Okay, there is no other information. You are right as far as 1901 plus is concerned. I've seen those, but I did not want to discuss them because this is well known. I want to discuss those which is unknown, which are unknown, and which is why I chose advertisement, which is actually complementing, the history, which is known, but which can be, expanded. So that was the idea. The reports are there, but only from 1901. The directors, etc., etc.
Didi, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining.
I wanted to thank you again, Prithwiraj. Took me back to your work.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining. I'm so happy to see you.
I'm very glad to know that you're working on the book. I wanted to partly follow up something that Sushil raised through Rajashri, whose name appeared there. And you answered it in a particular way by thinking about a time before when the company was not producing its accounts and annual reports, and a later. But in some ways, if I could come back, the main thrust of your dissertation and what you are now working on as a book is partly to think about advertising itself as a field, and not just as, yes, as a source for thinking about manufacture and manufacturing products and firm practices, selling strategies, the competition with Western products, etc. But also to think about how advertising as a profession, as a parallel field of publicity, and there are no professional firms, so the manufacturers themselves are producing this. So perhaps I was thinking that that itself could be talked about a bit, that it was not that there aren't other sources, obviously, for thinking about all these firms, but there's a way in which you wish to tell a story that was primarily based on and told through advertising. So as a methodological shift, I think that would be worth exploring, that what does it then tell you, not just about the history of early manufacturing and this interface of science with entrepreneurship and selling products that move from chemicals to medicine to personal toiletries. All of this becomes very, very important. But it tells us something about what you're calling a whole social domain of consumption itself. So my question really here was that when you look at the products and the changing nature of the products that Prafula Rai and Amula Chandra Bose are putting out, and you're coming into the second phase when Rajnaran Rajshekar Bose enters, Jotin Shen comes in as a major commercial artist. You did not speak very much on
that. I did not, yes.
But on the other hand, social medicine is something that you brought up. And you also brought up the shift to things like hair oil and talcum powder, initially as pharmaceutical products, things which were meant to be remedial, and then a gradual shift which is looking at what we may think of as beauty products, right? So this, I feel that it's also opening up a very important area in thinking about the place of the consumer, the trust with the Bengali physician, the trust in home medicine, and then a series of home-related medical products and even illnesses. I was quite amazed, from hysteria to all kinds of things are being treated by these drugs. So I wanted to think about this space of social medicine, what you're calling the home medicine, the element of trust between physicians, manufacturer, a consumer base, and the gradual shift from what you're calling the necessity of medicine to the luxury of the products. So I wanted you to speak a bit more on this other side, which is to think about the pitching for the consumer and how the story of the consumer comes in, partly through advertising, partly how you follow the nature of the products. And finally, in the last phase, where through the visualization of the healthy consumer, whether the athlete, the scholar, the mother, etc.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the observation, ma'am. And some of it was developed when you were supervising me. Now, while I was preparing this talk, actually wanted to speak on, Bengal Chemicals as the company, and how actually advertisements help us. So that was the main thrust. And actually the question that you asked is more relevant as far as age boss is concerned. Okay, as far as toiletries and other products are concerned, because he's the one who's and CK Sen also.
But if I could interrupt, but medical, what you're calling social medicine, home-based remedies, but which are not quack remedies, you're using Ayurveda, but you're taking it into a new domain of medicine. So this is something I feel that while your age post chapter and your CK Sen chapter will also bring in the Ayurveda practitioners into this field of modern consumption and manufacture. I think Bengal Chemicals is very interesting if you look at the shift from chemicals to medicine to gradually into things like oil and talcum powder, but they're also doing disinfectants, things which have a larger role in sanitization of homes and spaces, the plague thing. So it does help us to think about an emerging world of consumption. And therefore, that social medicine is what I was thinking about, where Bengal Chemicals material is very important.
Okay. Yeah, I think I need to, work on that. Yeah.
I think your material is there. I just feel that as you're developing it, this element of what you're trying to think about in terms of not just the changing world of manufacture and enterprise, which comes through very strongly, but the other side, which is the social space where these products are moving into, right? You are targeting it in particular ways, no agents across the counter, postal services, the ways in which you reach out to how these medicines and products enter the Bengali home, and the kind of nostalgia that now exists around. I'm thinking of a calendar that was produced this year by a young designer called Calcutta Cures. And they feature these products from tincture iodine to aquaticatis to milk of magnesia as things that are nostalgically part of a certain Bengali middle class culture, right? So today they've become like a form of nostalgia products because, in a different world. So I would like to think that even with the material you have, you could reflect on consumption quite productively.
Okay, ma'am. I'll definitely think about it. Maybe I'll discuss this once more with you. This is something which I've not really developed, so I need to develop this.
Mrinalini, do you wish to ask your question? Even if I think you...
No, I think I got confused between PC Ray and HPOS but the thing is, for me, the concern, I was never very sure about HPOS's politics, but I guess in PC Ray's case, it was always much clearer. But I don't know if Prithwiraj wants to elaborate on HPOS as well over here, then that's different. But then I just thought I'd clarify, I didn't want to confuse others as well. So.
Okay. Ridu has a question. Ridu?
Yeah, thanks, Prachi. Thank you for this wonderful, very illuminating talk, and it's also making me salivate for these archives, even though I don't work on the same kind of material. And my question really comes from absolute ignorance, so forgive me. But since you were talking about advertising, I was also wondering about rival companies based in Bengal, and when one thinks Ayurveda, for me, non-Bengali, I always think of Dabur. And I don't know if these two companies are, see themselves as rivals to each other. Do they advertise in the same papers, or, so that's the kind of question I had in mind. I mean, competitive advertising is such a big thing these days. I don't know whether, that a similar case existed, in precisely the same decades that you were talking about.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the question. Yes, when I was researching Amrita Vaja Potrika, I realized that more or less companies which had the same kind of products with Bengal Chemical was, Bathgate and Company, Wilkinson, W. Major and Company, Santogen, your Smith, Stain Street and Company,
Right.
companies like this. And within indigenous firm, you have the Indian pharmaceutical company, then your Victoria Chemicals, which was based in Ranaghat, Peacock Chemical Company. Now this Peacock Chemical Company is also very interesting because when I was researching Peacock Chemical Company, unfortunately materials are not there.
Right.
Is recognized in the official directory of the industrial exhibition. So, and it is there as one of the earliest company. And if this is so, the Peacock Chemical Company should be, the first chemical company rather than Bengal Chemicals. But unfortunately, I did not get material. So these were more or less the same companies. I did manage to see the advertisements of Dabur.
Right.
I did not feel that Dabur was actually a competitor because they were producing something, entirely different. They were also producing tonics and all.
Right.
But at that time, Dabur, the frequency of Bengal Chemical advertisements was much more rather than Dabur. But I did manage to see the advertisement of SK Bar.
Right.
It is there. It is there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering.
One problem, we don't have product-specific catalogs. So essentially, you need to search page after page, because there's the kind of needle in a haystack kind of situation. So there's a lot of you spend a lot of time in this looking for that particular company which you are researching. So what I did first was I schemed over. I mean, more or less, I took a look of the pages, and then I could make out that okay, these 3-4 companies are more or less advertising frequently, and so I zero down on them and I start researching, and then I find out that what information is already available and what information can be gleaned from the advertisement, and this is how I stitched up the story. So this is how it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Questions? Sharbajit, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just curious that could you suggest when professional advertising firms come in, or if Swadeshi firm institutions like Bengal Chemical, did they ever consult professional advertising firms? Because I mean, Jyotinshan and Rajshekhar Bose, they were kind of part of the enterprise. I mean, did ever Bengal Chemical consult professional advertising firms, or when those firms came into India, or how, or if they had ever or if they had any relations with indigenous firms? Maybe they were kind of catering to the European firms operating, but I'm curious that if you can share some light on that.
Actually, the history of Indian advertising and advertising in Bengal particularly should begin with these men: Prafulla Roy, Hemendra Mohan Bose, Rajshekhar Bose, etc. As far as Bengal Chemicals were concerned, they had their own printing facilities for printing labels, product catalogs, packing baskets, as well as advertisements. Okay, and it is there. I mean, in contemporary sources. In fact, Phonindranath Bose, manager, he clearly mentions that there were 4 large printing machines. There were compositors, there were blocks, and he also stated that the firm knew the importance of advertising, and the management was not shy to spare expenses. In fact, it was Rajshekhar Bose who actually penned some of the advertisements, and Jyotinshan was the artist. At that time, there were in 1905 you had B. Dattaram and company, But there was another firm which I discovered in my during my research, and that is commercial agency. But at that time, most of the advertising agencies, took the brief from the agents, then they, put together, pictures, and they printed it. And this was also a duty which was performed by the Amrita Baja Putrika. I mean, which means that if an advertiser went to them, and it is there in Amrita Baja Putrika's, their own advertisement. It stated that if any advertiser wanted to take their services, they could come to them, which means that if you wanted to advertise, you could directly go to the Amrita Bajar office and say that this is what I want to advertise, and they would do the needful. So this was how it was working. So as far as Bengal Chemical was concerned, they were, working on the entire process themselves. The copy, the printing, the brief, the art, the artwork, etc. Everything was done in the company. So they did not take, as far as my research goes, and to the best of my knowledge, they did not take. I mean, they were the best of men. I mean, Parashuram, fantastic writer. Jotin Chen, one of the best artists. In fact, Jotin Chen, in a resource which I found in the Government Art College, it's known as commercial art. It's clearly written that one of the earliest commercial artists of the times were Purna Chandra Ghosh and Jotin Chen. So the team was there. So that I don't think they needed any external agency for their advertising. So it was very much in-house.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? Unmute yourself and ask the question, or just put it in the chat and I can follow you. Maybe I'll take the opportunity while others are thinking to ask my question, Prithwiraj. I remember when we were doing the writing workshop, one of the things that you were arguing about was this methodological justification of using only advertisements, right? And I think listening to you kind of narrate the story, from the early days to 1903, I really kind of enjoyed, and I think I'm getting now what you were trying to kind of say, what kind of story can be told just through one, by focusing intensively on one kind of source. So I enjoyed that very much. But again, in the spirit of the old discussions, to push it a bit forward. So one of the things that, in the history of advertisements, or using advertisements as a kind of source of social history, we are looking at sort of the gap between what the advertiser wants us to see and what actually kind of is yielded, right? Either for the consumer to think of a history of consumption, or to think of a history of products, of business history, and so on. And I'm wondering, is there something about the company or about business practices that the advertisements yielded, particularly since you described this process of, then Bengal Chemical being able to control the advertising process in a way that others were not able to at this time. Was there something that the company would have liked to keep hidden, but which came out through the advertising process anyway, that you as a historian are able to actually kind of glean out today, about its early history? The part about the manager was interesting, that it did not make as much of an impact as other sources have said. But something else, perhaps, speak a bit more about what these advertisements yield in spite of they being a kind of PR exercise for a company.
Yeah, the advertisements as a PR exercise for the company, right? One thing I felt while I was, going through the archives is that, the expenses involved in advertising. If you see, early advertising is all about, the foreign companies, and then the Indian firms come in. But still, the cost of an advertisement, if I remember, is I mean, 4 lines, it will take you 1 rupee. To insert 4 lines, you have to pay 1 rupee. Of course, if you are you're kind of arranging with the newspaper for a prolonged period, you will have rates, but it's very difficult to know the rate. It was expensive. Now, keeping this point in view, if someone is regularly advertising, it actually also reflects, the kind of commercial, the value and the economical, aspect of the farm, that they were doing well, and which is why you are advertising. So it kind of gives, readers an idea that yes, whatever the company is advertising is genuine. And this is one of the reasons why the Holloway's bill or Beecham's bill, and it is argued that it was nothing, simply nothing, but they simply sold because they managed to advertise copiously, so to say. But of course, in case of Bengal Chemicals, I will not say so, because some of the names involved with the company, the doctors and all, they were reputed, and the products were genuine. And particularly after 1896, when Prithwiraj gains popularity as the discoverer of nitrite, it gains much more popularity. So when you are buying a Bengal chemical product, I definitely feel that at that time, readers would be knowing that here is a firm which is genuine, and the products are definitely worth a while. In fact, when I was comparing Bengal chemical advertisements with advertisements of other firms, I could see that some of what Bengal Chemical claimed was followed by the others. So it more or less set a trend which was followed by the others. And this shows that yes, what Bengal Chemicals was doing through his advertisement did kind of create an impact in the mind of the consumers. So definitely the advertisements themselves created an impact, I would say.
Okay, Hiranmoy Maiti, please go ahead and ask your question. Unmute yourself, Hiranmoy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
I have been listening to you from the beginning. My question is, during that period when Bengal Chemical was flourishing, Wilkinson's Sarsaparilla, Scott Thompson's Company Limited's Liver Tonic, and Baghdad Company's liver pills were very popular and famous. And they have doing great business in Bengal. Do you think that Bengal Chemical really stood up with their level? Question number 1. Question number 2, I have been expecting that you will talk about why the Amritabajar English advertisement was replaced by the very Bengali style of advertisement by Jatin Sengupta. Arj or Hoina, Pyrex was very famous, and you mentioned one, Ar Bhoy Paina. Though this kind of tagline were written by Rajshekhar Bose and others, really created a kind of confidence. You talked about social medicine, and that was kind of a confidence Bengal Chemical spread during that period. But my question is, do you think that Bengal Chemical stood against those Wilkinson's, Sarsaparilla and Scott Thompson's?
See, because you mentioned Bathgate or Wilkinson's, if you look at the history, Bathgate was founded 1811 and Wilkinson's 1829. So of course they had a lead, and Prafulla Chandra knew about, or you mentioned W. Major Company. There were others also, Santogen, etc. So of course they had a lead, but their products were popular. this is precisely what Prafullo Chandra Rai wanted to do. He founded that there is a demand for certain medicines in the market, and if the chemicals could be produced locally, because there were raw materials which were available locally, these can be produced locally and sold to the people. So why will you depend on the foreign products? So this is something which he wanted to do. So whether these were totally replaced is very difficult to say, because you don't have the sales the accounts and everything. They existed side by side. Bengal Chemicals also existed side by side, but Bengal Chemical, as evidence shows, was becoming popular. And it is just like that. These like Bathgate and Wilkinson, they continued. They also had their ads, and they had huge ads. But what is interesting is that even with such kind of lineage, just imagine Prafullo Chandra Rai 1893, Bathgate 1811, Wilkinson's 1829. So he comes up, he competes, and he manages to hold up. So this is what is important. And you spoke about the Bengali part. I already mentioned it, that when you have, when Bengal Chemicals were advertising their products which had images, they chose, the journals instead of newspaper, because 2-3 things. One, of course, is the shelf life. Journals, at least 15 days. If it's a monthly, 1 month shelf life. If it's a, a fortnightly, something else. But newspaper is 1 day. And then there's the quality of your the paper. So the reproduction of images is much better in a journal. So when you're spending so much to advertise, so it's better to give in a journal than in your newspaper. Plus, the journals were mostly vernacular, and the vernacular journals were popular among the middle classes. So this is what they targeted. So it was essentially what I say as it is essentially what is known as media plan. So they knew which were the magazines which were popular, and these were Bengali magazines. Which and if you advertise there, maybe it will reach the target audience. And because it was a vernacular journal, they had to choose the Bangla language. Okay. And particularly when you had, of course, at that time, women were getting in education in English, but there were a lot of women who were still comfortable with the Bengali language, so it made sense to write the advertisements in Bengali. So the message depended on the target audience.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
No other questions, Prachi. Can I come in once more, but only this time?
Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering, just as we round up, whether the other theme that is, in a way, you intervene within in terms of a certain historiography of Swadeshi politics, Swadeshi in the economic domain, Swadeshi in the space of manufacture and consumption. And there is an argument you're making that this longer history of Swadeshi, where you can begin with an enterprise like Bengal Chemicals, and you can take it into the 1920s with Ayurveda, with production, that in a way there's a different history to the political history of Swadeshi. So that in terms of creating tastes for consumer products, and where this competition with Western, I think that came up in a number of questions, the competition with other products which have a longer history, a more prestigious history, how you're trying to build a new client and customer base within that. So whether it's pharmaceuticals and then toiletry. So I would also say that here then is a different ways in which we can think of a domestic market and domestic consumption. And I'd like to refer here to the book that you did read, which is David Arnold's book called Everyday Technologies, where he's looking at products like the typewriter, the sewing machine, the cycle, which remain foreign products well into a period that you are looking at actual production. But even there, he's making an argument that the entire area of repair of the inner dealers and agents who kind of mastered the technology of parts repair, so that in a sense there is a parallel kind of Indian enterprises which are emerging, even if the products are remaining. Now, in this case, the products themselves are managing. So I'm thinking that, again, to bring the story of both consumption and manufacture, I think what could be foregrounded is a longer and different history of Swadeshi from the existing historiography. I mean, people have worked on Swadeshi manufacturers, but they're bound by a time frame, which is the time frame of political Swadeshi. So you are looking at a longer time frame and a wider kind of space in which the question of entrepreneurship and what considers indigenous, whether how you're using names, material, ingredients are coming in.
Yes. It is in a way a prehistory of Swadeshi, not only as far as Bengal Chemical is concerned, as far as H. Bose is concerned, as far as CK Sen is concerned, the three firms which I looked. Apart from these, there are some other firms, of course, whose materials are not easily available, which is using the same narrative with regard to made in India, or say a patriotic the name of the firm is patriotic dispensary, and they clearly write that the aim is to displace foreign medicines. And I'm getting to look at this as from the 1890s. So there is, of course, a prehistory of Swadeshi advertising. And one of the most popular is, of course, H. Bose. And you've read the dissertation, so you'll be knowing that as early as 1895, one of his ads claimed, made in India. In fact, the Indian stores, it says made in, of its product, it says made in Calcutta. So, and this was happening much before the era of political Swadeshi. That is also there. And what I have worked on is, apart from the products, Swadeshi fairs, then the way Swadeshi was reflected in, say, for example, attire, or say sweets, etc. And this is a chapter which looks at a sweeping history, of pre-Swadeshi. This is from 1890 onwards till 1905, and then I focus on the three firms. So that is there.
Joyanto Rani, please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for the wonderful talk. And I almost know nothing about this area that you were discussing, but it was very interesting to listen to you. I have just a general query, and the query is not about the advertisements that were written at that time. It's about the text. And do you think that all the other advertisements that came up during that time, these were all propagandist, and these were all data driven? I mean, a particular advertisement that I saw at the very beginning of your lecture, it was actually packed with details. What about the other advertisements that came up? I mean, you went through the archive And so what are the other advertisements and how you can relate the Bengal chemical ads to the other ads that came up in the newspaper? That's one. And second is, I mean, how do you actually situate these Bengal chemical advertisements in the I mean, contextually? What are the kind of contextual details that you can give us? Because I'm actually interested to know about the advertisement texts that were actually doing the rounds at that time. That's one. And the second is, what about the other contextual details that we need to keep in mind while we are assessing these advertisements? Because as everything else, we cannot actually look at these advertisements in isolation. So would you like to develop the context? That would be of greater help. Thank you.
Oh, okay, the first part, you see, I mean, because I was looking from 1880 to 1920, and when I was trying to stitch a history of the company, I had to look through each and every page, which means, you know, thousands of pages literally, and, you know, literally, I mean, many more, you know, literally hundreds and thousands of ads. So of course, it's very difficult to, you know, look at each and every one of them, because at that time I was focusing on, you know, whether, you know, Age Boss is advertising or CK Sen is advertising, or you find, you know, Bengal Chemicals, who were the competitors. So I progressed like that. So it's very difficult to, you know, focus that way. If you could tell me one, you know, specific company, maybe I can relate. But other means, I mean, there were various kinds of the companies. I mean, there were sellers of medicine, there were sellers of, you know, all kind of stuff. So I'm a bit confused.
If I can interrupt you here.
Yeah.
I'm not asking about the other companies that were there doing their business. I'm just asking about the advertisements that were actually coming up in the newspaper. I mean, Bengal Chemical was advertising on the newspaper. So what are the other advertisements? What kind of ad language that you actually confronted? And I'm interested about the text of these advertisements. I mean, so I'm focusing on those advertisements which were happening side by side the Bengal Chemical advertisements. So, and I want the contextual details. I mean, the kind of ad lines that were written, the kind of detailing that was done to sell a product. So I'm not focusing on any particular company. I'm just focusing on the advertisements that were actually getting published side by side, Bengal Chemical on Amrita Bazaar or any other newspaper or any other magazine. So it's like a kind of a contextual study that I'm looking for vis-a-vis Bengal Chemical and the other companies.
Look, okay. So in general, if you said you had followed my talk from the beginning. So when I actually showed you the first advertisements, the first slide itself, you could see that, you know, it's relegated to one column, you know, it's stuffed with information. So this was more or less the trend at that time, right? So you will have the name of the company, maybe you will have the name of the proprietor, their, you know, qualification, etc. And then you stuff it with what you think might interest the readers, right? And this is what also what Bengal Chemical did. But then it improved itself. This is what I wanted to show. I mean, when it's moving on in the first year and the changes in the second year, it's much more spaced out. It's focusing on specific products. It's giving specific product information, its price. So there was a difference. Because at that time, the main problem is that there is no one to guide you. So you look at other advertisements as a kind of a guide and you write. Or what you can do, you can go to the newspaper and you tell them this is what I want to advertise, and they will, you know, advertise on your behalf, following what was the trend. So it was more or less, I mean, more or less, if you say that chemical companies, say for example, companies like Bengal Chemical, the trend in language or the way they advertise were the same. sometimes people who would be having a bit more budget would include an illustration, but that was it. Otherwise, there was not much change in the advertisement, unless, of course, you had men like Bengal Chemical was fortunate to have. Rajshekhar Bose, artists like Jyotin Singh, who really changed the advertisements of the company, and which is the reason why it got popular, because there are contemporary sources which maintain that how Bengal Chemical, not only the Bengal Chemical products, but Bengal Chemical advertisements being read and enjoyed. And this is the same story which happens with H. Bose and Company, particularly when he advertises Kultonili or Dilkhosh with those rhymes. In fact, this is what I discovered. Siddhartha Ghosh, who's actually walked on them, he says he wrote on the rhyme, but nobody actually was certain who wrote it. And people assume that it is H. Bose. Actually, it was not H. Bose. I researched and found out that it was none other than Rabindranath Tagore who actually did it for them. So there's a difference between who's writing for the company and the flat kind of language which you see based on the language which you see in other advertisements. So this was more or less the general trend, right? And it varied from product to product, of course.
Okay. Mrinal has a question. I think we'll take Mrinal's question as the final question for today. What is the broad spectrum of the nature of the consumers targeted?
Sorry?
Mrinal Patnakar's question, what is the broad spectrum of the nature of consumers targeted by the ads?
You want to know the target audience, Mrinal?
Yeah. Broadly. I mean, I'm just wondering if that means the amount of advertising that is going on. Surely there is a bigger, consumer. So I was just wondering, what are the nature of the consumers that were being targeted? I mean, is there a variance, or is it city-based, middle class, upper middle class? What is it?
Yeah, I got it. See, in the initial phase, at least before specialized advertising agencies come, most of the advertisements would be for people who could read either newspaper or journals. Okay. However, in this phase, I could find out that there are advertisements which are catering to specific, populace or a target audience. For example, when you are writing for the Mafusshal consumers, you write it. In some advertisements, I have seen that this particular product is suited for, say, a textbook. Say, for example, a law textbook, which is advertised for students taking exams, say for students, pleaders, lawyers, etc. So there you get a kind of idea. But for other advertisements, unless it's mentioned, you can, it was essentially for people who could read, and the advertisers hoped that it would reach the maximum possible people and give them the sales. Okay. But of course, when there were exceptions too, women were being targeted, and this is more or less from the first decade of the 20th century. Initially, you do not have images of women because it was taken for granted that they did not have purchasing power. They did not have any say in particularly with regard to a Bengali household. If we just focus on Bengal, say. So they did not have that. But then I could make out that some advertisers, specifically H. Bose, for example, even Bengal Chemical, the ad which I showed, they were actually targeting the ladies and essentially the educated ladies of the household, But the journals were not only based in the city, they were also being read by ladies based in the Mafusshal. So you can say that the target audience was pretty broad-based. And this is an argument which I make. It was not limited to the city, because there's another notion which says that, the Mafusshal people or the people living in the countryside or rural areas, they do not have the purchasing power. But this is something which has proved to be wrong because of the kind of investment which advertisers are making. In fact, I've seen advertisements where advertisers based in rural areas, they advertise stating that we want canvassers who would go into the countryside and rural areas. So this points to the fact that the marketing was, the market was actually getting broad bases, and there were people who could purchase based not only in the city but in the villages. So in the period that I'm looking at, 1880 to 1920s, if not in the late 19th century, definitely from the 20th century. But there were exceptions. I mean, but I have seen that even in the late 19th, 20th century, you have examples. There are exceptions to this rule, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prithwiraj, for a very engaging conversation, a wonderful talk, but also a detailed and very interesting Q&A. Thank you to everyone for participating. I invite all of you to check out the JBMRC Jagannath Bhavan Facebook page, which you can find by just sort of searching for Jagannath Bhavan. If you don't see it already, you can also look at CSSC Archive. That is our Jagannath Bhavan Facebook page, on which all our talks are streamed live, but also announcements and other sort of illustrations and examples from our archive are periodically posted. You can also follow us on Twitter. The handle once again is at CSSC Archive. You can email us at jdmrc.office@gmail.com to be added to our mailing list so that you can receive announcements of all our events. And with that, I thank everybody. I thank Prithwiraj once again, and we'll end this meeting now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prachidi. Thank you.
Thank you.